The morning air on Kepler Station buzzed with the usual mix of anxiety and excitement that accompanied advanced xenobiology classes. Students from across the galaxy shuffled into the sterile, white laboratory, their varied forms creating a rainbow of alien physiology. Tentacles slithered alongside chitinous legs, while crystalline beings clinked softly against the metal floors. Marcus Chun adjusted his worn backpack and took his usual seat in the back corner of the lab. As the only human in the class, he had grown accustomed to the stares and whispered conversations that followed his presence. The Galactic Education Initiative had only recently begun accepting human students, and many still viewed his species with a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed disdain. Professor Kethvar, a towering insectoid with razor-sharp mandibles, clicked his way to the front of the class. His compound eyes glittered with what Marcus had learned to recognize as anticipation. The Zephyrians' teaching methods were known throughout the station for being unconventional, often bordering on cruel. Today, class, we will be examining fear responses across different species, Kethvar announced, his voice carrying the characteristic buzz of his kind. I have procured a live specimen that will demonstrate the primal terror that drives most civilized beings when faced with a true predator. A murmur of excitement rippled through the classroom. The Villani students' bioluminescent patches flickered rapidly, while the Morphean students shifted their gelatinous forms in anticipation. Only Marcus remained still, a growing sense of unease settling in his stomach. Two automated platforms glided into the room, carrying what appeared to be a reinforced containment unit. The transparent aluminum walls revealed a creature unlike anything Marcus had seen before, even after months of studying alien life forms. It stood roughly 3 feet tall on 4 legs that ended in wickedly curved claws. Its body was covered in midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light, and multiple eyes dotted its elongated head like stars in the void. Most unsettling were the appendages that writhed from its back. Part tentacle, part spine, they moved with an intelligence that suggested they were more than mere limbs. "Behold the Vorthak," Professor Kethvar announced with evident pride. Native to the outer rim world of Xerion Prime, these creatures are apex predators in their environment. Notice the multiple sensory organs, the natural weaponry, and, most importantly, the pheromone glands that can induce paralytic terror in most galactic species. The creature in the cage pressed itself against the far wall, its many eyes darting frantically around the room. Marcus noticed something that seemed to escape his classmates' attention. The way the being's appendages trembled, the rapid rise and fall of its thoracic cavity, the defensive posture it had assumed. These weren't the behaviors of a predator. This was a terrified animal. The beauty of the Vorthak, Kethvar continued, manipulating controls on his tablet, lies in its ability to weaponize fear itself. Watch as I lower the containment field slightly. A section of the cage dissolved, and immediately the classroom was filled with a sweet, cloying scent. The effect on the other students was instantaneous. The Morpheans began to solidify in terror, their usual fluid grace freezing into rigid sculptures. The Villani's lights went completely dark as they instinctively tried to become invisible. Even the usually confident Zephyrian students clicked their mandibles nervously and stepped back from the demonstration. Marcus felt a slight tingling in his nostrils, but otherwise remained unaffected. He watched as the Vorthak's eyes fixed on him across the room, and something passed between them, a moment of recognition that transcended species barriers. The creature wasn't looking at him with the calculating gaze of a predator sizing up prey. Instead, Marcus saw something that made his chest tighten with unexpected emotion: hope. Fascinating, Professor Kethvar muttered, studying his scanner readings. The pheromone output should have incapacitated every being in this room. Yet our human student appears completely unaffected. He turned his compound eyes toward Marcus with what might have been curiosity or annoyance. "Mr. Chun, please approach the specimen." The request sent a visible shudder through the remaining conscious students. Marcus stood slowly, ignoring the way his classmates shrank away from him as he made his way to the front of the room. With each step, he became more aware of the creature's distress. Its appendages had stopped their aggressive writhing and instead curled protectively around its body. "Closer," Kethvar commanded. I want to see how a human reacts when faced with a true apex predator. Marcus stopped just outside the effective range of the creature's claws, close enough to see the fine details of its scales and the way its multiple eyes tracked his movement. What he saw there wasn't malevolence or hunger. It was intelligence, awareness, and an unmistakable plea for help. "Professor," Marcus said carefully, not taking his eyes off the creature, "I don't think this is what you think it is." Kethvar's mandibles clicked in irritation. "Mr. Chun, I hardly think a human is qualified to lecture a professor of xenobiology about predator classification. The Vorthak is well documented as one of the most dangerous species in known space." "But look at its behavior," Marcus insisted, gesturing toward the cage. "It's not displaying any aggressive postures. Its appendages are in a defensive configuration. Its body language suggests submission rather than dominance." And he paused, struck by a sudden realization. "Professor, what did you just call it?" "The Vorthak, obviously. Though I suppose human memory capabilities. No, before that. You called it a specimen." Marcus turned to face the professor, his voice growing stronger. "This isn't just an animal, is it? It's a sentient being." The classroom fell completely silent except for the soft whimpering sounds coming from the cage. Even the paralyzed students seemed to be listening intently. Kethvar's mandibles twitched in what Marcus had learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of a dismissive shrug. "Sentience is a relative term, Mr. Chun. The creature possesses a rudimentary intelligence, yes, but hardly enough to qualify for personhood under galactic law. It is, by all legal definitions, a non-protected species." "Legal definitions," Marcus repeated, feeling a cold anger building in his chest. "So, because some committee decided it wasn't intelligent enough, it's okay to terrorize it for educational purposes? Mr. Chun, I will remind you that you are a guest in this institution." Kethvar's voice carried a warning edge. "Your species has been admitted to the galactic community on a trial basis. I would suggest you not test the patience of your betters." The casual dismissal hit Marcus like a physical blow, but not for the reasons Kethvar intended. The professor's words crystallized something that had been building in Marcus since he arrived at the station. The constant undercurrent of superiority that most galactic species held toward humanity. They saw humans as primitive, violent, barely evolved enough to be worthy of education. But as Marcus looked around the room at his paralyzed classmates, cowering before a frightened creature that posed no actual threat, he began to understand something fundamental about the galactic community. They had grown soft, comfortable. They had forgotten what it meant to face genuine danger and had instead learned to fear anything that didn't fit their neat categories of civilization. The creature in the cage made a soft sound, almost like a whimper, and one of its appendages reached toward Marcus through the gap in the containment field. Without thinking, Marcus extended his hand, allowing the alien flesh to brush against his fingers. The touch was warm, almost electric, and he felt something that made his breath catch: gratitude. "Remarkable," Kethvar muttered, his scanner beeping rapidly. "The creature's stress indicators have decreased significantly since you approached, Mr. Chun. It seems to find your presence calming." Marcus ignored the professor and focused on the being before him. Up close, he could see that what he had initially mistaken for scales were actually intricate patterns of bioluminescent cells, currently dim with stress but occasionally flickering with faint colors. The creature's eyes, all 7 of them, were studying his face with an intelligence that was unmistakably sapient. "What's your name?" Marcus whispered, so quietly that only the creature could hear. The being's appendages stilled completely, and, for a moment, Marcus thought he had made a mistake. Then, slowly, one of the appendages began moving in deliberate patterns through the air. It took Marcus a moment to recognize what he was seeing. The creature was trying to communicate through gesture. "Professor Kethvar," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the racing of his heart, "I think you need to see this." But, when he turned around, he found that Kethvar was no longer focused on the demonstration. Instead, the professor was speaking rapidly into a communication device, his mandibles clicking with excitement. "Yes, Director Hasmore, the human shows complete immunity to Vorthak pheromones. No signs of distress whatsoever. I believe we may have underestimated their species' potential. A chill ran down Marcus's spine as he realized what was happening. This hadn't been a simple educational demonstration. It had been a test, and he had just revealed something about human physiology that the galactic authorities found very interesting. The creature seemed to sense his distress, and its appendages began moving more frantically, forming complex patterns that Marcus was beginning to suspect might constitute a language. One pattern repeated several times, and Marcus found himself memorizing the sequence despite not understanding its meaning. Mr. Chun, Kethvar's voice cut through his concentration. Please step away from the specimen. The demonstration is concluded. What happens to it now? Marcus asked, not moving from his position. It will be returned to its holding facility until the next class period. We have several more demonstrations planned. More demonstrations, Marcus repeated, looking back at the creature. Its eyes had gone wide, and its appendages were moving in what he was beginning to recognize as distress patterns. You mean more torture sessions? Kethvar's compound eyes fixed on Marcus with unmistakable hostility. Mr. Chun, you will remember your place. This creature is university property, acquired legally under galactic statutes regarding non-protected species. What we do with it is none of your concern. But Marcus was no longer listening to the professor. Instead, he was watching the creature's desperate attempts at communication, and, slowly, pieces were beginning to fall into place. The deliberate patterns, the repetitive gestures, the way it had immediately sought contact with the one being in the room that wasn't paralyzed by fear. This wasn't random animal behavior. This was a desperate attempt to communicate with someone who might help. The realization that followed hit him like a cold wave. If this creature was intelligent enough to recognize his immunity to its fear pheromones, intelligent enough to attempt communication, intelligent enough to hope for rescue, then what did that make everyone else in this room? As the containment field fully restored and the creature was wheeled away, its many eyes never leaving Marcus's face, he understood that something had fundamentally changed. He had entered this classroom as a human student trying to fit into galactic society. But as he watched his classmates slowly recover from their induced terror, chattering excitedly about the fascinating demonstration they had witnessed, Marcus realized he was no longer interested in fitting in. The galactic community had shown him exactly what they thought of intelligence that didn't fit their definitions, of creatures that didn't meet their standards of personhood. And, in doing so, they had revealed something about themselves that Marcus found far more terrifying than any apex predator. They had become comfortable with cruelty, so long as it was legally sanctioned. As the class ended and students began filing out, Marcus remained in his seat, his mind racing with the implications of what he had witnessed. The creature's desperate attempts at communication played over and over in his memory, and he found himself sketching the gestures in his notebook, trying to find patterns that might constitute a language. He was so absorbed in his work that he didn't notice Professor Kethvar approaching until the Zephyrian's shadow fell across his desk. Interesting notes, Mr. Chun, Kethvar observed, his compound eyes studying the sketches. Planning to add xenobiology to your major? Marcus looked up to find the professor's expression unreadable. Just trying to understand what I saw today. And what did you see? The question hung in the air between them, and Marcus realized this was another test. Everything since he had stepped foot on this station had been a series of tests, each one designed to measure not just his capabilities, but his character. I saw a sentient being terrorized for the entertainment of students who were too frightened to recognize its intelligence, Marcus said quietly. Kethvar's mandibles clicked slowly, and, for a moment, Marcus thought he saw something like approval in the alien's eyes. Interesting perspective, the professor said finally. Tell me, Mr. Chun, what do you know about the human concept of protective instinct? The question caught Marcus off guard. I'm sorry. During today's demonstration, while every other student in this room was incapacitated by fear, you not only remained functional, but actively sought to comfort the specimen. This behavior is unusual among galactic species. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. What are you saying? I'm saying that your species continues to surprise us, Mr. Chun. The galactic community has long assumed that intelligence and aggression were inversely related. The more civilized a species becomes, the less capable they are of violence. It's why our worlds are so peaceful, our societies so stable. Kethvar moved closer, and Marcus caught a scent like ozone and metal from the alien's exoskeleton. But humans seem to break that rule, the professor continued. You maintain your capacity for violence while developing complex ethical frameworks. You feel protective urges toward other species, even ones you've never encountered.